Hello and welcome to the Educators Podcast. I am Vishal Bagaita, the founder of Educator and your host for this podcast. Educator is an online marketplace where students can get access to video courses, downloadable documents and tutors to help them study for their exams. The Educators Podcast is an opportunity for you to learn more about what goes into creating the learning resources on the website. You can hear more about our latest resources and discounts by registering today at educator.com and signing up to the newsletter. In our second episode, we are joined by Sophie Butler, a primary school teacher specialising in early years. In this episode, Sophie tells us about the Phonics syllabus and the story behind her brand called Oz and Fox, which she created with her sister. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello Sophie, thank you very much for joining me today on the Educators Podcast. Could you introduce yourself please, letting us know a bit more about your experience in education?
Yeah, so hi Vishal and thank you for having me. So I'm a reception teacher and I work at a school, Oasis Academy, Rylands. I've worked here for 6 years, I'm still there now, and I've been very lucky because from my experience there, as well as being a reception teacher, I've done some time in year 1 and year 3, and I've also been the early years coordinator and nursery manager, which means that I'm in charge of the early years, 2 reception classes and a nursery class, and this just gave me a great opportunity really to depth in my understanding and knowledge of working with young children. It allowed me to work with a lot of different professionals such as speech therapists and learning mentors and educational psychologists, and it's really broadened my experience. I did this in between my 2 maternity leaves, and so now I've gone down to part-time, and also I trained at Roehampton University, and as I did 3 years training to be the primary school teacher, and I specialised in the early years. So being able to then go and work in the early years and then be in charge of the early years has just really all connected my past experience together. Yeah, so it's been good.
Great, okay. And you've previously told me that you also worked as a nanny before becoming an early years teacher, and you just mentioned your experience in nurseries. So that basically means that you've always worked with very young children, preschool children. Was this age range a preference that you had from very early on in life, or is it something that just gradually developed as you entered into your career?
Yeah, so I've always actually liked working with children, but I sort of got my first job in a nursery by mistake, just because my cousin was working there and I needed a job at the time, so I took it. And then I actually found that I ended up working in nurseries for the next 8 years, and I just loved it. And like you said before, I'd done nannying, again working with some children who were school age then. So when I was working in the nursery, I thought, I have a real passion for this, so I'm going to go to university. So I went as a tourist student to university to do my to become a primary school teacher, just with the intention of being a nursery teacher actually. But then when I started work, I did start in reception, and I really liked working in reception. So I sort of fell into the profession just by chance, and actually ended up loving it, and I've just stayed there ever since.
Oh, great. Okay. And the videos that you've created that we host on Educator cover phonics and early reading. Now, this is obviously a critical part of a child's education, but as it's so early on, many of our listeners might not be familiar with all of the scaffolding that relates to teaching skills reading. Can you tell us a bit more about how it deals with the phonics syllabus and how a child is expected to develop literacy in the early years?
Yes, totally. So, I feel like what you said there, can be quite unknown of the importance of the education in the early years. And really, this is when they start to learn everything. I think more people are becoming more and more aware of that now, and a lot more research has been done into it. And, about 20 years ago, there wasn't a curriculum with the early years. So it has now been recognised, and there is the national curriculum now. And the early years equivalent of the national curriculum is the early years framework. So the early years framework covers the whole child in early years and nursery, in reception and nursery, and they have to be meeting these certain guidelines. But within it, it's very broad when it comes to the reading and things like that. So what the government did is they started letters and sounds, which is specifically for phonics and learning to read. So there's a letters and sounds document, and I'll just tell you quickly about how the children's learning is scaffolded when it comes to teaching the phonics. So how it starts with is you want your child to be hearing all those sounds and hearing the different sounds in the words, and it's all to do with the listening. So could be saying the sounds to them, and you're saying the word cat, for example, and that you want them to be able to hear the k, a, t in the word cat. Now, first of all, they'll start by hearing just the initial sound with the k, and then they'll start hearing the initial and the last sound with the k, t, and then eventually it'll go up to k, a, t. Now, while they're starting to hear all these sounds, you can also start teaching them to recognise all the sounds. So in order for them to start reading, they need to learn all the individual sounds in the alphabet. So like k, a, t, the k, kicking k, all the different sounds. So they start to hear it, then they can start recognising it, and then you start putting it all together and they start reading the word. So they'll recognise that it's a k, an a, and a t, and that's how they start to read. Now, the reason for phonics is because it allows the children to start reading and to be doing it independently. So there is the other option where you can teach your child to read by sight. So they'll just memorise all the words like cat, the, bag, is, and they'll start to read that way. But the thing is that they're not able to then, they need to know every single word in order to read a certain book. So the idea behind phonics is that it breaks everything down so that they can read, they'll be able to start reading independently. So this is a word they don't know. So say there's the word sheep that they're not too sure of. If they know all their phonics sounds, then they'll be able to, and their digraphs, they'll be able to just read sheep, and they'll be able to read it. Whereas before, by reading by sight, they'd have to know that that's the word, and that's the word that says sheep. So that's how the phonics is done, and that's how it's done in the, so the development matters. They have the initial sounds is like phase 1, and then they have phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, phase 5, phase 6, where new sounds get introduced and new words get introduced, and then that should develop the reading onwards.
Right, okay. So in terms of those later phases, the complexity of the word structure is increased effectively. Is that right? Or is there more to it?
Yeah, so that's right. So what happens is that you start with individual sounds, which is just the individual. So it's quite hard to explain it sometimes when you can't see it, but there's individual sounds. So I'll use the sound, which is the H.
Yeah.
And then later on, when you go up into like phase 3, phase 4, they start introducing, which I'm just going to call double sounds, but it has the official name of a digraph. So a digraph is a double sound where there's two letters written together, like A and I. And then when the A and I is together, it becomes A. So these children all learn all these individual sounds and these double sounds, and then you get triple sounds. And as you work through the phases, they learn all these sounds, and then it enables them to be able to read words. So if you take the word high, which has a h at the beginning, and then it has IGH, which is a triple sound, they're able to read the word high. But down in phase 2, they won't have learnt the sound IGH, so they won't be able to read the word high independently unless they happen to know it. So that's learnt in a later phase. So that goes all the way up to phase 5 and 6. And you will find that they will still be doing phase 5, phase 6, and the later stages into year 1. So it goes up to, and then sometimes, depending on where your child at, sometimes in the beginning of year 2 as well. So that's why Development Matters works with the early years curriculum, the EYFS, and it also works with the national curriculum.
Right, okay. That's really helpful actually to understand the context in which you've created these materials. And I mean, it'd be interesting to learn from you whether there was a specific moment where you thought there was a gap in the resources that were available and thought that maybe you should have a go at creating them.
Yeah, so what I found is from two different perspectives, actually. So from teaching, as I was teaching as my whole class, what I found is that quite often now in schools is that you are doing a lot of your teaching and the children's learning on the interactive whiteboard at the front of the class. And in maths, there's quite a lot of resources that you can do online, and you can read stories online and things like that. But what you can't do, or what I found, is that there was no resources to teach the class to read by blending. So it has later stories which they can just enjoy. The children can enjoy the stories by hearing them on the like on the CBeebies app and things. They have story time, but there isn't any actual stories which you could model and show them how the reading process works and how to blend. So I was sort of thinking selfishly, this would be a lot easier for me if I had if I had some stories on the board that I could model this to my whole class. So the particular scheme we were following at the time was all paper-based and quite expensive for the school. So we were doing our paper-based, and we had to have groups, and then you have to have lots of different adults. But as we know how the funding is going now, there's less adults than there was when I first started teaching, which was 6 years ago. So just to be able to teach the whole class on the whiteboard, just so they can see it every day, modelling how to read, would actually be really helpful. So I saw a gap there. And then the other gap was in regards to the parents. So being the early years phase leader, you do quite a lot of phonics work. I was doing a lot of phonics workshops and then talking to the parents individually at parents' evening, and they were asking me questions about phonics. And then sometimes a parent would grab me in the playground and they'd ask me a question about personal to their child about phonics. And what we were just finding coming up over and over again over a few years is that parents are just not confident in phonics, and even though they're wanting to help their child to learn to read, it's completely different to how they were taught to read, and they're not sure how to help their child to read, and then their child's turning around and saying, that's not how you say that particular sound, and they're like, well, I don't know how you say that sound. So there's like a lot of home learning barriers. So I also thought, well, wouldn't it be great to have a website that was both used in schools and at home, shows the parent how to do the reading, and then shows, as well as the teacher being able to show the children in school. So that's why we came up with the idea for Oz and Fox Phonics, which hopefully fills that gap in both areas. So helps the parents at home with the child's learning at home, and as well as in school for the teacher.
Okay. And so, as you say, your brand is called Oz and Fox, and you also hinted that the videos are animated. Can you tell us how you came up with the idea behind the brand?
So how it was is I've got at the time when I first created it, I had one son whose name is Oscar, and quite often we call him Ozzy or Oz. And then I suddenly, in my teacher way, thought, Oz, that's phonetically readable, O and a Z, Oz. So we thought, well, we could base it, and he absolutely loves foxes. So we thought, we could base, this is where I'm saying we. So me and my sister, we co-created this, the website Oz and the animated stories, Oz and Fox. And we were coming up with ideas together because she's not in teaching, but she's very creative and good at writing, and she's also got a business side. So that's why I decided to start it with her. And we were coming up with these stories and this idea of it. And we thought, well, Oz absolutely loves foxes. So we came up with the name Oz and Fox. And then we've got these other two characters, Dog, mainly Dog, because that also is phonetically readable, Dog. And also we have a female character called Bez, who comes in it a bit later on. So we just based it around these four characters. And then it's just the animated stories are just all based around their adventures. And level 1 is quite basic, and then level 2, level 3, it gets they get a bit more involved. So that was the idea, and that's how we came up with the 4 characters and decided to base it on those ones.
Okay, I mean that's really nice to hear that personal inspiration side, and then also you've got your sister working with you as well. So there's a real family feel to the creation. And as I sort of mentioned earlier, and you said as well, that the videos are animated, which presumably brings its own sort of set of challenges. Can you tell me a bit more about how you decided that was the way to go? I know you hinted at moving away from paper into video. But I wonder, when it came to deciding to do the videos, did you ever think that maybe a different type might have worked? So maybe just you talking to the camera and using some other technique to introduce these characters?
We decided with the animated video because that's what we wanted to do first of all, just because knowing how children are and, being around a lot of children and our modern world now, a lot of the stuff that they enjoy and what engages them is actually video. So, they find that they're watching a lot of YouTube sometimes, and they're quite often watching things on CBeebies, and they get really involved. And, I'm thinking of Paw Patrol because that was one that was particularly popular at the time. And I was a little bit like, oh, if these books were based on something like Paw Patrol, then, they might be picking up this reading quicker and engaging those children who maybe aren't always, to do examination, just the engagement, and kept up children. At one point, we were just whether to do the on the page, just the characters, still images, and then need to the animation, but still have to lose the idea that we want them still doing books would be completely like them seeing it as two separate things. So I think hopefully we feel like we've grasped that balance where if a child is reading the book online, yes, it's animated, but you can tell clearly that it's still a book and you're turning the page. And so if they are then reading a book, then they can take the same concept they know to read on both things and turning the page, and it's the same idea of reading the book. But mainly, we did go for the animation, although, it does have some of its challenges, but we just felt like it would be received better by our main audience, which is the child, just to keep their interest, really. Yeah.
Sure. That's understandable. And just want to understand a bit more about how the videos are created, because there's obviously going to be a lot of effort that goes into it. You mentioned that you're also working with your sister. Which one of you sort of does the animation and the voiceover, or do you have other people helping you?
Oh yes, so we've done the created that we've written and created the stories, and we've given the ideas, and it's our and we've done with the teacher process of it. But we have a very talented person called Kev who does our all of our animations. He created our website for us, and we have to work quite closely with him in order to achieve what we want. So he does all of our animations. And then we did start off by doing our own voiceover. And then luckily my sister's housemate is a presenter and she's done performing arts for a long time. And she was just like, well, I'll do the voiceover for you, because we were finding, fault in our own, and it's not our speciality. So my sister's housemate, who I've known a long time as well, Lucinda, she does the voiceovers. And we go to a studio quite near where we live, and at Dark Horse Studios, and that's where we record it all. So she's done all the recordings, and we've kept the same person, Lucinda, who does all of the sounds and all of the voiceover in the videos, and on every single one. So we're more ahead in the voiceovers than we are in the animation, because the animation takes quite a long time to do.
Sure. Okay. And so obviously with a number of people involved, so you've got 4 people there effectively in the team. And then, you've hinted to me before as well about how the course is divided into different stories. If we were to take one story as an example, can you just sort of explain what the steps are to sort of create that story? And how you manage that process with the team of 4 people?
Yeah, so we've probably done it a little bit differently, because before we even started looking into it, we did actually have all of our stories written. But I'm just going to do it as an example, like say from the first one. So we've got Oz and Dog, which is our first very beginner book. So the story was written. It was made sure that the only word that isn't phonetic there's only one word in it that isn't phonetic. so that was fitted in with our phase 1. So we had all of the learning and the curriculum sort of thing in place first. Then that you could probably do that only in 1 week actually. So that story took probably 1 week to do and to finalise. Then we record the voiceover for it. So we go to the studio and record the voiceover. And again, that doesn't actually take too long. That you could do that in an afternoon. And then once that's all done, it goes over to Kev for animation. And the animation probably takes up to about 1 month to 6 weeks to do for the whole story. So per story, you're probably looking at about 2 months in total. And once you've written the story, which, if you can do it in 1 week, the thing that takes the majority of the time is the animation for it.
Right, okay. And in terms of the time that goes into editing, how much effort tends to go into that? I mean, is it a case that the animation is done, shared with you, and then you perhaps have some feedback, and then it has to go back to Kevin to perhaps rework or reorder?
Yes, so sorry, I forgot to mention this part. So before Kev even starts on the animation, we break down the story, and then we write next to it saying what we want the video itself to show, and then Kev will either say no, that's not possible, or it is possible, and then so in the very first book, he was sending back every single animation, and then we were saying, yes, we like it. And then that was going on. So that one was probably taking a bit long. But now we've built such a trust up with Kev that quite often he would do about 3 pages, and then we'll look at them, and then he'll go, I'm going on to the next one now. And then he'll go on to the next ones. And so far, so good. We've always been quite happy with the end product, mainly because that's what we've asked for. And he's either said yes or no beforehand. So actually, Kev has never ever had to redo any of the animations. In that area, because we're quite in touch over email.
Yeah.
We've never had to have that experience yet of having to redo one of them.
Okay, and you mentioned obviously there is that process by which you share what you want to see on the screen. So presumably it's a storyboard of some kind.
Yes, that's exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah, and can you sort of tell me a bit more about how long it takes to develop that storyboard? Because you talked about it taking it a week or so to write the story. I'm curious about how you start imagining what you want to see on the screen.
Yeah, so what we normally do, so if we've written a story as we go and we think of something that we might think that would be particularly funny or a bit entertaining for the children or something like that, then we will make a note of it on the story as we go through. I'll give an example of the first one because one of the second books, because it's all about something that the dog and the little boy Oz like to do. So sometimes it's only 2 words, so it can say something like likes pink. But then in our head, we're thinking of a pink pig or something like that. So we just write next to it. So I guess the storyboard and the writing is sort of done at the same time. And then it's only if we've missed out a few pages or something that we go back and do it. So the storyboard is probably involved in that 1 week as well.
Right.
Having all that ideas together.
Okay. And is that you or your sister who does the storyboard in terms of just imagining those pictures out?
Normally my sister.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And obviously you've created a few stories already. Can you tell us about how they've been received by children and their parents?
Yes, so we've been very lucky actually. So I've got a focus group at my school currently who are using it and giving a lot of feedback. And we also have a few teachers using it. And then there's been the people who have actually joined, and we've been lucky because they've given us some feedback too. And also I've taught it with my class. And I get them to, and we're really pleased with how it's going because I've had a lot of parents who have said to me, oh, this is exactly what we need. And then normally the children have one particular page that they particularly like and they want to go back to it. So I know in one of them the dog is rolling along in a tomato and that's their favourite part. And what has been the most coming back from the parents and the children is that they like how simple it is, and that the children in the very beginning of their learning to read have been able to access it. So they've been able to understand it. It's been the same. So the children who are at different schools have said, well, it links into what they're doing at different schools. And they've been able to come home and they've been able to read it independently. So, we were quite happy with that feedback because that is what we wanted. So they liking the characters. In particular, they like the animal characters, the dog and the fox. So they're like our popular ones. And overall, we've been very lucky because it's been very well received so far.
Great. And so what happens now? So obviously you've got a taster course, which only covers parts of the lesson sound syllabus. What's next on your in your plans?
Yes, so what we're doing is we're just carrying on. So the first aim is to finish level 1. Then we're going to move on to level 2 and level 3. But then in between, which goes all the way up to phase 6, so it covers every single letters and sounds phase. The level 3 stories go all the way up to then. Also, we have a couple of songs that have been ready and recorded, ready to be animated. So we're just waiting for animation for that. And that is based on the phase 4 and 5 digraphs. Because also digraphs and trigraphs, because what we were finding is there's loads and loads of materials, songs and stuff on YouTube and Jolly Phonics of all the individual sounds, but not many songs out there for the digraph and trigraphs. And there's this something called the split digraph. That in particular is quite hard for even adults to grasp. So then we've come up with a song for that to just to create easier understanding to be played in schools and stuff. So that's next. We've got those 2 already recorded, ready to be animated. And also thinking about maybe putting some of the books into print. This is mainly for the schools because it allows the teacher on the interactive whiteboard to demonstrate reading the story as a whole class, and then the children can take that book home and then read it to their adult. So it's just that's just another option, but we're only going to start that once all the animation is done on the website.
Right, and is there a timeline that you have in mind for when you want to get through the animation?
Yeah, so we're hoping to have level 1 finished within the next 3 months, and then we'll be starting level 2, and then level 2 finished after the next 6 months, and then it will be level 3. And level 3, there's not as many books, so level 3 should only take about 3 months to do. So yeah, I guess overall we're still looking about, just for the timeline if it takes for animation, hoping to have everything fully complete in a year.
Great. Well, I look forward to seeing those on Educate-All. And thank you very much, Sophie, for joining me today. It's been a real pleasure to hear about your process and your inspiration. So thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. I hope it's been helpful.
Of course it has. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you enjoy Sophie's bubbly enthusiasm as she answered my questions? I particularly enjoyed the moment where she had the realization that the nickname of Oz given to her son was phonetically readable. This is of course the origin story behind her brand Oz and Fox. The need to create resources arose sadly from funding cuts, but as she explained, there was interest from parents in any case in relation to the phonics syllabus. I hope that hearing about how she turned this into a project involving 4 people with different skill sets inspires you to create your own learning resources. If you are interested in uploading resources to Educate-All, please do reach out via the website contact form, social media, or a trusty email to info@educateall.com. You will also find information about getting started on Educate-All in the guidance part of the website. Don't forget that you can find links to Sophie's courses in the show notes and the social media posts that accompany the release of this episode. If you've got this far, thank you very much for listening. Sophie and I were based in different parts of the country, so we recorded this episode through Skype. I hope it sounded clear to you. Finally, the last message, but by no means the least. Please do like and share the podcast. Knowing that the podcast is scoring well with you, the listener, gives me the motivation to create more episodes. Don't forget to hit that subscribe or follow button too.